So we're starting with these strategies to have you guys understand that it's not that difficult. You've got to remember, we can't treat stress, but we can create mental well-being. There's a big difference there. Think about the happiest people you know. Okay, are they healthy? Okay, usually because I work with a lot of people who aren't in a good state of health, I do see a parallel often between the state of happiness, the way they view the world, the way they handle adversity, okay, and I guess their positive internal dialogue and the way they actually show suffering or heal. Okay, so when we're talking about this, we're going to remind you guys that it's not just smiling or not smiling, being happy or not being happy. We're going to remind you also that these choices of either sick thoughts or healthy thoughts, toxic thoughts or nutrient thoughts actually have a huge, huge impact on your health. So mate, what's your favorite strategy when you know that you need to give yourself a little bit of a boost, a positive internal dialogue, let's say? What do you like to do?
What's the worst that can happen?
Good.
You know?
So philosophy there, I guess,
Yes.
A mental strategy.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I love that idea.
Yeah, so I mean, even if we, let's say, a stressor, as we understand, an external thing that happens to me, let's say someone is angry with me that I really love, let's say my partner is angry with me. Then I could ask, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I would probably say, well, most likely it will dissolve because I know it anyway, and you wouldn't even have to go there. But the worst thing that I have seen happening in this instant is we won't talk for an hour, and then, something happens.
Yeah,
and you get back
you might
into it.
sleep on the couch.
Yeah, luckily, I never get to that,
Okay.
but I understand. But, even if that's the worst thing to happen, and we have a good sleep, and tomorrow it will be all good. So I might be actually quite relaxed in my mind, right? Rather than, oh my God, this could be the end. This is definitely bad, bad, bad. And so the negative wheel would just turn.
And guys, believe it or not, I love this example because being optimistic should be an inherent, I guess, almost an inherent instinct. After a while, and at sufficient time of internal dialogue that's negative, we actually lose that ability. Now, I can relate to what you said. I spent many years overseas and I wasn't always happy. It was in Brazil. And many times it was a toxic city, big, crowded, polluted. It was totally incongruent with my health. But I love what I do and I was totally fulfilled being there. But I always said, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I thought, I'm Australian. Worst situation, I go back to one of the best countries in the world. Hey, that ain't too bad, is it? Do you know what I mean? So there's a little self-protection mechanism that may or may not always be easy to implement, but when you can really help. Now, we started laughing before, but believe it or not, there's classes of yoga, there's classes where people get together and they start to laugh, and then the laughter's contagious, isn't it? Have you ever done one of those classes?
Oh, it's amazing. So I lived in New Zealand during the time of these many earthquakes, and you get a trauma if there's just one earthquake. I think in New Zealand there were about 3,000 within a year, and so there was a lot of trauma in people. And so, a stressor might create stress on you. These earthquakes definitely were that. So where laughter really can help is to deflect it, of course, but also once you have stress in your body, and that's the thing we mentioned earlier, that if you can actually be conscious of your body and your thoughts, that there is stress and that really grinds me down right now. Laughter classes are amazing to actually release, different hormones.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, laughing after a certain amount of time will actually induce positive hormones, positive pathways in the brain. What we're doing is we're consciously, as we've said before, we're consciously practicing something that will have, I guess, positive effects in changing those neurological pathways that have become more negatively orientated towards positive ones. Now, we've gone and jumped in the deep end. We're not saying, hey, go to a class of laughter because it's not easy for everyone. You want to do it by yourself, you get a laugh in front of the mirror. Believe it or not, just smiling in front of the mirror is unreal.
Yeah,
just smiling more. If I'm speaking to Sebastian like this, after about half an hour, he'll probably laugh a lot. But what's happening here? My brain has connections to the muscles in my mouth. And those muscles, can be activated to smile, and the brain knows that straight away. So believe it or not, we can actually work backwards, even if we're not feeling that happy, and create that bit by bit just by smiling like the Joker. And after long enough, I guess that's it. That's one of those first steps. It's one of those strategies that we can employ. What I'm really aligned with when we talk about positive internal dialogue, and actually, because it's not always that easy to change your thoughts or or dialogue to positive, is it? But what I find makes a lot of sense is just being present. So maybe at the start of a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, at the start of an awareness change, we will be like, okay, the negative thoughts are still there because the hurt's still there, the trauma's still there and all the rest. However, if we accept that and bit by bit we're conscious of it when it happens, but we also have strategies to maintain ourselves present, bit by bit, the potency of those negative thoughts, that negative dialogue will be lessened. Guys, you've got to be patient. It could take weeks, could take months, but it will happen. So one book, there's a particular time in my life I can remember that I was negative. It had been a long time trying to figure out a certain situation. I was working in different countries, juggling a relationship in one country. Anyway, cut a long story short, I read a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I will never forget that book. Guys, that is one of the best, I guess, the most didactic, simply written books that is so easy to understand. And it will actually talk you through gradually the process of being present. And it is absolutely fantastic. I remember one tip in it, look at nature. If you're sad, just go to nature and admire it. Just look out. It might be a wave, it might be a cloud, it might be vegetation, it might be an animal. Remember we talked before about being congruent, genetically congruent with our ancestors, our Paleolithic ancestors? Well, that's exactly what they would have done, and it actually works.
And if you think about it, what your brain hears you thinking, if you like, is like, I'm happy about it, I appreciate that. So overall the brain gets like, okay, things are good. Things, we're a good space here. Actually, I don't need to signal to the rest of the body that we're in stress, because obviously there are thoughts thought right now that are positive, they're appreciative, that are calming. Therefore, I will just get in line with what's observed and what our state seems to be, the external state that it seems to be around us, and I will internalize it and relax the whole body and go back to normal. No silver-toothed tiger anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And another thing it's really important to understand is that these are tips, these are strategies and ideas that have helped us and many other people. Yeah. However, we'll go back to what we already mentioned also, the importance of communication. Now, if we're holding things in, it bottles up, it ferments, doesn't it? But if we have somebody to talk to, whether it be a therapist, a psychologist, sometimes a psychiatric specialist, because we do recognize that there are cases that will need medication to break a certain effect. Remember, we're saying effect of a cause. The cause won't change, guys, if we take medication, but there are times that people will benefit greatly from doing that. But the important thing is they're always conscious of the fact that there is an underlying cause, and they'll come back to that. So remember the importance of communication, okay? If it's not with a professional, but it's with your friends or family or your loved one, whatever it is, it can be enormous. And it's such a shame these days to see so many problems, especially in relationships, have the root cause of lack of communication.
That's it. And I think that there are some really quick wins. If you think about, look, you want to hold back because you don't know how to say anything. Like something that changed my life basically is that I often couldn't mention certain really personal or emotional things to friends or my partner. And what I would find is there is a sentence that I could say without being feared, and that's like, hey, there's something I found hard to say. And at that moment, you actually give it to the other part and say, oh, what is that? And at that moment, you can't really go back.
Exactly, you throw yourself.
Okay, I'm jumping, and then I tell it, and afterwards you feel so much better. And I mean, 90% of the time, maybe always, I don't know, it goes actually down quite well if you say, look, I really need to air that. I don't know how exactly to phrase it to do it well, but it dwells on me and it creates stress within me.
Yeah, no, I love that. Sometimes you say something, you can't get out of it, you're going through with it. Now, the order, I guess we're talking about these strategies is not necessarily in order of importance, okay? You can get one or multiple or all of these strategies and apply them to your lives, and of course it's going to be positive, okay? Now, one thing at this stage of the game, I'll mention movement, is extremely important, okay? Movement, as we've mentioned in other modules, stimulates serotonin and suppresses cortisol when it's done in a healthy way. Now, an external factor such as movement, when it is applied to our body and is congruent once again with the physiology that we are innately accustomed to, has profound effects on almost every function in our body, including our level of happiness, okay? So when we're moving also, our body manages to suppress painful signals, okay? It helps sleep. It's good for cardiac health. It creates a healthy appetite. It creates a healthy regulation of our hormones. A lot of these things, guys, are thrown out by negative thoughts, okay? That when I say thrown out, they're actually exacerbated or worsened by negative thoughts. So let's imagine if we can introduce, even if the negative thoughts are continuing, yeah, but we're introducing these things like movement, sunlight, good sleep if we can do that, positive diet where we encourage nutrients and avoid toxins, bit by bit we realize, hey, this problem is actually not as emotional, or it is emotional, but it's got a larger physical component than what I realized. And bit by bit, hey, that dread of getting out of bed in the morning might be bit by bit substituted by, hey, I can't wait to go and do that exercise. I can't wait to meet up with my friends and play tennis again. So sport or exercise is where you are social and interacting with other people. There's a double whammy. 2 birds with 1 stone.
Love it. So basically an indicator, when you're in a not so good state or you feel stressed, doing sport introduces certain hormones into your body again, and therefore helps you to change your thinking, or it just takes actually the stress factor in your brain away and it's easier to think more positively?
Sebastian, good example of that would be, hey, have you ever seen an animal, a dog for example, it's taken from a farm to a small little backyard of a house in a city and observed its behavior? The dog will never be happier and therefore never be healthier. Now we are animals, essentially animals living in captivity. Our lives are nowhere near as congruent with the lives of movement that we had back in the day. So if we understand that, we can actually reverse that, introduce movement, and therefore introduce a positive influence on our hormonal system, which will be easier to take us towards happiness and be less likely to take us towards grumpiness or depression or unhappiness. It's incredible, isn't it? And you'll notice that itself. Like let's say it rains for a couple of days. People tell you that they are usually more tired when they're less active or when they're inactive. And they'll say, hey, days that I've been more active, I'm not as tired. Okay, so understanding your sleep's important. We've talked about that before, but that is definitely a really important hack. We would say to you guys that if you know your sleep's not 100%, and let's say you're in an environment that's noisy, okay, put some earplugs in, okay? If you're in a room that's, the lights coming in, do everything you can to make it a dark place. That's an essential for sleep also. Make sure if you've got any electrical equipment in your room, I would say turn it off. We don't need it on. It creates EMFs and that does affect some people's sleep. Often electrical equipment has lights also that stimulate us. Okay, here's a good tip as well. I don't know if you're someone who goes to the toilet or does something during the night, if you wake up and turns the light on. As soon as you turn the light on, your body will think it's daytime and hormones like cortisol will increase, preparing you for the day. So there's these little hacks, okay? The temperature we sleep in is really important. We shouldn't be sleeping too hot, okay? There's an ideal temperature. A lot of people, especially in winter, they'll say, I had the worst night's sleep, especially the first days of winter, yeah? Because we just go, overboard with the amount of covers that we put on. So sleep temperature is really important. The foods we eat before we sleep are important as well. Okay? If we eat too close to bedtime, our body's spending more energy digesting the food than regenerating our body. And also, interestingly enough, if certain foods are increasing blood sugar levels, then what's happening? Yeah. They also take up cortisol. And we've already explained that pathway a few times. So it's going to be very difficult for the body to secrete melatonin, which is what we need to initially get to sleep. Okay? While we're talking about sleep also, I think it's important to understand brain waves. Okay, so when we're awake, okay, now we're in our beta wave brain state, okay, but when we go and, for example, we meditate, we put our brain into an alpha state. It's a very, it's a restful state. It's a state where a lot of benefit, a lot of physiological benefits can occur in the time that we're meditating or in that alpha brainwave state. When we go to sleep, we go through another brainwave called a theta state. Theta, have you ever been like almost asleep and you have ideas come in? You're like, I've got to get up and wake that out.
Yeah, there are certain meditations that some people listen
to.
And it really helps to calm everything down, but there's a clarity that comes almost unconsciously out of you.
It's like a creativity, isn't it? It accentuates that theta state. Then obviously the deep sleep, when we get to sleep, it's the delta deep sleep. Yeah, and I think that people are confused about deep sleep and REM sleep. they're both equally as important, but deep sleep is the first part of the night, and it's usually where we're processing whatever happened during the day emotionally. And then what's important will go to, be processed in REM sleep and stored. So this is when we're talking about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind. If we go back to therapy, for example, guys, we've got to remember that when trauma has been big enough and long enough or impactful enough to go past the conscious mind and into the subconscious mind, it can be very difficult to deal with. A lot of people are unaware of trauma or issues they have in their subconscious mind. Okay, now the REM sleep is very important for the subconscious mind. So making sure we've got a healthy amount of REM sleep is very important to deal with subconscious issues. Okay, it's interesting, but a lot of people who, let's say, suffer headaches, and as a chiropractor, during my career, I'd examine a lot of people and go, I can't find anything. What's going on here? I'd touch certain muscles and nerves, nothing. But when we dive deep, we'd realize that the subconscious mind can actually provoke pain to distract the person from thinking about a certain trauma.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So yes. I guess, look, the more we talk about it, the more we realize just how incredible our mind is, but also how important it is to feed our mind with the right nutrients and avoid the toxins.
Yeah.
Mate, what other strategies can you come up with, positive brain health strategies?
Well, helping other people sometimes also takes the stress off yourself. I don't know what it is. You might be able to explain it to me, but there's certainly that aspect of people helping other people feeling purpose.
Fantastic.
And maybe also negating, the importance of that stress that there. And say, well, in comparison to these people that I have now. Yeah.
Putting everything in perspective.
Yes.
And I guess it goes almost hand in hand, gratitude. Here's a really easy hack, guys. You're in a hard time, you're in a crisis, you're dealing with negative internal dialogue. Well, just end the day thinking of 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day, and start your next day thanking whoever, universe, God, whoever you want to thank for 3 things that you're grateful for, bit by bit. Remember what we talked about pathways? We are creating new pathways, but this is a conscious process. And the good thing, the exciting thing to know about being conscious is that we have control of it.
Yes.
This isn't bad luck or good luck. This is actually, hey, I'm going to control my fate here. I know that I'm being overcome by negative thoughts and negative internal dialogue. I will take a conscious step to change that.
Yes, and your situation has actually nothing to do with how you actually feel about the stress and where you're at. I've seen people on deathbed being grateful and happy, and I've seen people, multi-millionaires, even billionaires, being really unhappy, and they should have everything they have. So it's your mind, and that's awesome. That's really a big relief, actually, because it's not attached to anything but how you actually respond to what's going on in your mind and what you do make out of it.
Yeah, exactly. How you see your perspective on the situation, And comparing yourself to other people is very negative. It's potentially a disaster for ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's all these strategies. Becoming aligned with your life purpose is really important. Your values. If you're in a situation where you're not congruent with your values, whether it be the people around you, your family, friends, whatever, really have a look at that and see, or ask yourself, could that be having a negative impact on me? It's so important to be aligned with your values. We're going to get a little deeper now on, technology and other, I would say, probably not more aggressive strategies to take this problem, the bull by the horns. But remember, for me, I like to think of presence. I like to think of a mind that is being, if I say the word tortured or affected by negative internal dialogue, well, that mind loves rest. It's like, for example, saying, I've been really busy at work, stressed out. What happens often? You get sick. And you get sick to be able to give your body a rest. Rest is good. So being in a present state is good. This is just one of the many things I utilize, but Inner Balance by HeartMath is really good. You'll download an app on your phone, and you'll clip 2 little things here to your ear, 2 little clips. And it is basically mentioning and it is going to measure your coherence. So what you'll see, you'll be able to follow your thoughts and your breathing and actually look at this little dial going around your app. And I'm pretty sure it's green. When it's green, it's like, yeah, I'm going well. When it's red, it's not. But you'll almost always be able to relate what thought pattern you're in at the time and the result you're getting. So if you know that green's good, you can actually train yourself to that way of thinking, being, or feeling, okay, consciously, instead of thinking, oh, this is a random choice. Another thing I love doing is breath work. Have you ever done much breath work?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And I think it's so powerful. And then again, you would be able to explain to us why. But it's one of those things. If you do deep breathing and certain breathing techniques, it just takes the stress of breath by breath.
No, for sure, 100%. No, like breath. Well, you asked about like what happens physiologically, but physiologically, via our breath, we can actually move our body either into a sympathetic state or into a parasympathetic state, remembering that a sympathetic is more that, the stressful state where certain physiological functions like heart rate and blood pressure are increased, or a parasympathetic one where we're favoring rest, we're favoring reproduction, and we're favoring the nurturing, the digestion as well as one of them. So via breath work, and I've seen some amazing things doing breath work. Firstly, I love breath work because it's conscious, very conscious. So while we're there breathing, okay, we don't really have the time to think, do we? We don't have time to entertain, these negative influences and thoughts that might have been dominating our lives. And when you give enough time to it, you actually get to the end of it, your body will have physiological reactions often. You might get, it's called tetanus, where your hands involuntary sort of come into clenched fists. You might get sweating, you might get tingling all over your body, but it bypasses many functions in your body to stimulate your pineal gland. And it's a beautiful, fuzzy feeling. If I say fuzzy, I don't want to turn any of you off when I say that, but it's a state you want to stay in. The longer you're in that state, the more beneficial it'll be, because you do not have negative thoughts in that state at the time. And a lot of the work I've done, I've actually seen people that have done lots of work with therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, including psychiatrists, get profound results in a short amount of time and surprising them. They might cry, they might yell out, they might have all sorts of reaction, go, my God. So they've basically bypassed their conscious mind to their subconscious mind, which is very strong. Yeah, right. Okay, so breath work, guys, check that out. Wim Hof, he's got a great 11-minute breath work session. You'll find that online. Easy to do. I do that every day in the morning. Another thing I love is brain tap. Have you heard of brain tap? Mm-hmm. So brain tap uses binaural beats with light stimulating the back of your retina. And there's 600 algorithms. So there's, for example, algorithms to get you into deep sleep, to help you deal with grief, to do all sorts of stuff. But it's the time you separate for yourself between 10 and 20 minutes daily, could be in the night and the morning, to gear that your brain for certain functions, or keeping it present and opening up new connections. This is the thing. What do these things do? We've talked about connections. You can actually consciously, even subconsciously through technology, open up new positive neurological connections. And that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think just remember that it really depends on what works for you. There are certain tools that people love and it's just their thing, and other people would say, look, I wouldn't even go near it, or it didn't do anything for me. And you will see what that is, whether it's the hard mess way, which really technically shows you where you're at emotionally and gives you guidance. And that's something that has been researched for over 40 years. There's really, really clear studies that indicate that you can do all sorts for your body there. And for others, it's more like going more the yoga path and saying like, okay, within this realm, what is it that takes stress off me, and how does that exactly work? And it's beautiful because there's almost unlimited options of how you deal with stress, and you just find your modality that works for you. You put them all and stack them all in your favor, and you have a package that just works for you, and that just works for success.
Exactly. Yeah. And think of anything important in your life and what you do to maintain that and care for it. Well, it just makes sense that we look after our brain health and our emotional health, because nothing else in our life will function at its optimal level without those. Okay, we won't have happiness, we won't have health. Now, I guess summarizing, concluding this last part, I would feel that if we didn't mention avoiding toxins would be massive. Okay, so we have talked extensively in these episodes that negative thoughts are toxins, but let's go back to what we know are the obvious toxins also that we've talked about in other episodes, that being toxins from food, sugar, trans fats, okay, anything inflammatory for our bodies, lack of movement, lack of sunlight, okay, toxins, chemical toxins that we might get in our cleaning products or our personal hygiene products. You guys have got the message, but basically with toxins at higher levels in our body, we know that it will promote a situation where we are incongruent with our environment, okay, genetically, and that will also affect the way we deal and think about the stresses that we have to deal with in a day-to-day situation. So look, it's been an absolute pleasure for both of us to present this series for you guys. We really hope that you've liked it. We've certainly enjoyed presenting it.
It was fantastic. It was so much fun. Yeah.
And look, we look forward to going on and getting into a little bit more detail in subsequent chapters, modules, and episodes, and passing even more information on to you guys. Thank you very much.